At 7:15 p.m. on July 2, 2011, the atmosphere at Forum Roller World Skating Rink in Grand Prairie, Texas, was buzzing with laughter and energetic hip-hop music from a birthday party. Suddenly, strange popping sounds mixed into the melody, turning the space chaotic. Initially, many people thought it was celebratory fireworks or the strong beat of a song, but they quickly realized the terrifying truth. It was gunfire. The scene shifted from joyful to horrific in an instant. Screams and frantic footsteps echoed throughout the rink as gunshots continued relentlessly. Some people collapsed unconscious, blood spreading across the polished floor, transforming the entertainment venue into a tragic crime scene. In just 2 short minutes, the skating rink was engulfed in a blood-soaked nightmare. Emergency 911 calls were made continuously, with trembling voices reporting the incident's location. On the other end, dispatchers could hear the terrified cries of panicked children and the painful groans of wounded victims. The emergency situation forced dispatchers to immediately mobilize all rescue forces to the scene. Just minutes later, the sirens of police cars and ambulances rang out, signaling the arrival of emergency and security teams. Upon entering the skating rink, officials were shocked by the rarely seen tragic scene. Under the still flashing colorful lights of the disco system, police discovered 6 bodies scattered around the birthday party area. The scene was heartbreakingly contrasted. Untouched plates of food, undrunk beverages, and gift boxes still tied with pretty bows, all scattered messily across the floor. The birthday cake with the boy's name written in colorful frosting still sat on the table, surrounded by candles that had been extinguished midway. Around it, overturned tables and chairs created a chaotic scene, while dark red bloodstains spread across the polished floor and splattered onto surrounding walls, creating a horrific picture that would make anyone who witnessed it shudder. During the crime scene examination, police discovered a high-performance automatic handgun near one of the victims, clearly the weapon that caused this tragedy. Shell casings were scattered throughout the party area, indicating at least 10 rounds had been fired in the brief period of less than 2 minutes. The most heartbreaking aspect that medical examiners had to face was that all 6 victims were deceased. Through initial examination, police determined these were members of the same Vietnamese family. All had died almost instantly from fatal shots fired at very close range, aimed at vital areas like the head and chest. In this tragedy, there was still a ray of hope as 4 other injured people were quickly taken to the hospital by the emergency team. Fortunately, their conditions were assessed as stable and not life-threatening. In this tragic circumstance, no children were harmed, thanks to adults who quickly moved them away from the danger zone. What made experienced investigators shudder was the cold calculation of the perpetrator. He had enough composure to wait until all children left the scene before carrying out the brutal act on the adults, a detail showing this wasn't an impulsive action, but a carefully calculated plan. The first person on the victim list was Trinh Do, born in 1981 in Vietnam. In 1994, when she was a 13-year-old teenager, Trinh and her family began a new life in Fort Smith, Arkansas. From a young age, Trinh was known in the community for her kind nature, bright intelligence, and ability to get along with everyone around her. In her adult life, she found stable work in the accounting department at the University of Texas at Arlington, where she was beloved by colleagues. Trinh embodied an exemplary wife and mother, always dedicating her complete love and sacrifice to her small family. Those who knew her could never forget her radiant smile and optimistic spirit full of vitality. Michelle Ta, 28, was Trinh's close younger sister, and also one of the victims of this tragedy. Michelle had just gotten married a year ago. Described by loved ones as a modern, energetic young woman, Michelle had a special passion for shopping and cooking delicious meals for her family. She was living happily in Arlington, Texas with her beloved husband. Notably, Michelle was preparing for something, a plan that would have been carried out the week after that fateful birthday party. Hien Ta, 21, Trinh's younger brother, was a promising young man with an intense love for sports, especially swimming and basketball. Hien not only trained his body, but also showed team spirit by actively participating in community activities for local Vietnamese youth. In the hearts of friends and relatives, Hien was remembered as a young man with an always shining smile and warm heart, ready to help everyone around him. Maria Linta, 16, Trin's youngest sister, was attending local high school and actively participating in activities at the Sacred Heart of Mary Church Choir. She was loved by peers and teachers, not only for her always blooming smile, but also for her special passion for photography. Lynn had a habit of capturing beautiful moments in life through her camera lens, creating a precious treasure trove of memories for family and friends. Thuy Nguyen, 25, was the fifth woman in this tragedy, in the role of Trin's sister-in-law. Thuy had married Trin's brother and had only recently immigrated from Vietnam to settle in America. In everyone's eyes in the family, Thuy was known as a gentle, kind sister-in-law with the patient and hard-working character typical of Vietnamese women. And finally, the 35-year-old man found closest to the murder weapon was Tan Quoc Du, born in 1976, Trin's husband. Their love story began in 1997 and ended with their wedding in March 2000. Tan Do had built his family life in Grand Prairie, Texas, and had stable work at Trinity Industry Incorporated in Dallas, a company specializing in providing industrial equipment. In the surrounding community's eyes, Tan Do was often perceived as a rather secretive man with little social interaction. He rarely participated in community activities and was virtually absent from social media platforms. Even on his wife's personal Facebook page, images of Tan Do only appeared in a few scattered family photos. To outsiders, he gave the impression of a quiet, hard-working husband and father who seemingly had no serious legal problems in his past. When reviewing the victim information, everyone initially thought this was a brutal revenge aimed at massacring the entire family, causing a happy family to be destroyed. However, witness testimonies from those present at the scene shocked the entire investigation team. The truth behind this tragedy was completely different from what they had imagined. The party that day was organized to celebrate the birthday of Tan Do and Trin's son, but what no one could believe was that Tan Do himself, the father in the family, was the one who brought weapons and carried out this bloody attack. Physical evidence also supported this hypothesis when the automatic handgun was discovered right next to Tan Do's body, indicating a high probability that after attacking his wife's family members, he had done the same to himself. The biggest question now was, what drove a man to commit such brutal acts against his own family? During deeper interrogation of witnesses, a picture of the complex relationship between Tan Do and Trinh began to emerge. Police learned that this couple had experienced conflicts and disagreements in the past, but no one among them could imagine that ordinary family disputes could escalate into such a bloody tragedy. From here, a comprehensive investigation into Tan Quoc Du's past, about his relationship with his wife's family, as well as his personal history, was initiated. The documents and information they were about to discover would unveil the secret of a dark story hidden beneath the peaceful exterior of this seemingly happy Vietnamese family. Identifying the main investigation direction as a domestic violence case with suspect Tan Quoc Du, the Grand Prairie Police Force deployed a systematic investigation plan along two main axes. First was to accurately reconstruct the events at the massacre scene. Second was to dig deep into the social and psychological context behind family conflicts that could lead to such horrific criminal behavior. Crime scene processing was conducted with the highest accuracy. The forensic expert team meticulously collected every scattered shell casing, marked and analyzed the trajectory of each bullet, while detailing the position where each victim had fallen. Their goal was to reconstruct as accurately as possible the time sequence and order of shots fired during those terrifying minutes. Initial analyses painted a haunting picture of the perpetrator's method of operation. Approximately 14 rounds had been fired from the semi-automatic handgun. The first bullet, according to expert assessment, was almost certainly aimed directly at Trinh Do at very close range, causing her to collapse immediately without a chance to react. Immediately after the primary target was taken down, the perpetrator instantly turned the gun to successively attack other relatives of his wife who were standing around the area. What was particularly noteworthy and showed the extreme cruelty of the perpetrator was that each victim had been shot 2 to 3 times before dying. Subsequent forensic examination results showed some people had tried to flee or sacrifice themselves to protect relatives in those life and death moments. Hyen was found dead several feet away from the party table, showing he had quick reflexes and tried to escape danger when he realized the horrible thing happening. However, that distance was still not enough to save him from the deadly bullets. Michelle was found lying over her youngest sister, Lynn. This showed that in her final moments, Michelle didn't think about her own life, but threw herself toward her sister for protection. Lynn was discovered near the entrance of the skating rink. This position showed the girl had tried to find an escape route in panic, but unfortunately was still shot from behind while trying to flee. Thuy Nguyen, the sister-in-law, died from a fatal shot to the back. Although these details were extremely heartbreaking, they provided undeniable evidence that Thanh Do had intended to completely eliminate all family members on his wife's side that he targeted. Not one of them was spared or escaped from this evil man's aim. Through ballistic analysis and gunshot residue examination, forensic experts determined only one gun was used, Thanh Do's handgun. This completely eliminated the possibility of accomplices participating in this massacre. The bullet found in Thanh Do's head completely matched the gun he was holding, confirming that after completing his cruel mission, he had turned the gun on himself, ending the tragedy coldly and ruthlessly. The time from the first shot to when Thanh Do shot himself was only about a minute. He fired so rapidly that many victims didn't have time to react or find cover. The investigation team also checked the weapon's registration. It was a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. The serial number showed it was legally purchased in Texas several years ago. Notably, when checking ownership, police discovered Thanh Do had a valid Texas permit. This meant he had undergone background checks and was not prohibited from owning weapons at the time of permit issuance. This discovery made the story much more complex, because when digging deep into Thanh Quoc Du's personal background, the image of the quiet, hard-working man that everyone knew began to crumble. Court records showed his past was not as clean as the exterior the community had perceived. In 1994, when Thanh Do was just 18 years old, he had his first encounter with law enforcement for unlawful breaking and entering into a residence. 5 years later, in 1999, he was arrested again by police, this time for a more serious charge: domestic violence. These prior convictions raised many questions about Thanh Do's true character and his ability to legally possess weapons. However, instead of hastily delving into possible loopholes in the weapon control system, the investigation team decided to focus their efforts on exploring the nature of the relationship between Thanh Do and Trinh, as well as finding the deep causes that might have driven this tragedy. The investigation was expanded on a large scale. Investigators divided duties to contact and collect testimonies from everyone related to the incident. 30 guests who attended the fateful birthday party, from close relatives to family friends, were all required to come to the police station to provide information. The atmosphere during testimony sessions was extremely heavy and emotional. Most people still couldn't overcome the mental shock from what they had witnessed. Many of them couldn't control their tears when having to remember and recount those horrifying moments. Sobbing sounds mixed with storytelling created a mournful atmosphere in the interrogation rooms. Although the information gathering process took place in highly emotional circumstances, valuable testimonies from witnesses gradually pieced together a clear overall picture of the motive behind Thanh Do's brutal behavior. Through fragmented and tearful accounts, an image of a marriage full of conflicts and hidden hatred toward the wife's family began to emerge, explaining the tragedy no one could have expected. Testimonies from witnesses gradually unveiled the secret behind this tragedy, revealing a painful picture of a broken marriage and long-accumulated family tensions. A cousin in the family shared important information that Trinh and Thanh Do had actually not been living together since the end of 2010. The reason for this separation was Thanh Do's frequent violent behavior toward his wife. This birthday party was organized with special meaning. It was the last hope that the relationship between father and son could be mended, even though the feelings between husband and wife could no longer be saved. However, even on this special occasion, the tense atmosphere between Thanh and Trinh was still clearly present. Notably, just days before the party, the couple had a heated phone argument about Trinh's firm decision to divorce. Jordan Pham, Michelle's husband, and also a direct witness, provided deeper insight into Tan Do's character. He said that although the whole family knew Tan had tendencies toward anger and difficulty controlling emotions, no one could imagine he could go to such an extreme with his own relatives. According to Jordan's account, right at the party, Trinh and Tan had tense arguments, mainly focusing on child custody issues. Many other guests also confirmed they witnessed the couple having heated dialogue in a corner of the room, with voices occasionally rising and falling. Notably, Tan Do's facial expression at that time showed clear tension and anger. However, because they considered this just ordinary personal disagreements within the family, the guests decided not to intervene and continued participating in the joyful atmosphere of the party, preparing for the birthday song ceremony for the boy. The fateful moment came right after everyone finished singing Happy Birthday. At that exact moment, completely unexpectedly, Tan Do approached the DJ table and whispered something to the music controller. Immediately after, he suddenly pulled out the gun he had hidden in his clothing. With a loud, authoritative, and threatening voice, he ordered all children to leave the area immediately. And then, before anyone could react, continuous gunshots rang out, turning the joyful birthday party into a horrifying scene that witnesses would never be able to forget. Their testimonies fully confirmed the events police had deduced from the crime scene. The perpetrator had acted after deliberately separating children from the area, and he had aimed at each family member of his wife before also taking his own life. Most importantly, the motive was narrowed down to marital deadlock. The final piece completing the true picture was the history of domestic violence between Tan and Trinh. When checking the Tarrant County Court database in Grand Prairie City, investigators found a thick file of divorce papers and protective order applications filed by Trinh several years earlier. This valuable documentation revealed the victim's chilling prediction of the very tragedy that occurred. In the protective order application filed in December 2010, Trinh clearly stated that her husband had physically abusive behavior and threatened to beat his wife multiple times in the past. For instance, in early 2010, when Trinh expressed wanting a divorce, Tan Do had dragged his wife into the closet, pulled out a weapon, fired into the air, and threatened to kill her if she dared leave. In November 2010, during an argument about money, he physically assaulted Trinh in front of the children, then dragged her to the kitchen, held a loaded weapon against her, and threatened to shoot. The two children at that time were terrified and cried out when witnessing their father continuously threatening and hitting their mother like that. Even during Thanksgiving 2010, Tan Do wouldn't let his wife sleep. Whenever she closed her eyes, he would splash water on her face until Trinh collapsed from exhaustion. At the end of December 2010, after a beating, Trinh was so panicked, she fled the house in the night with her two children and sought an emergency protective order from the court. Tarrant County Court later agreed to issue a restraining order in early 2011, requiring Tan Do not to approach his wife and children and to surrender any weapons. Reading Trinh's tearful testimony in the file, investigators understood that today's tragedy had been sensed by the victim long ago. However, by March 2011, Trinh had withdrawn the protection request and asked the court to cancel the restraining order with the reason, "My husband promised to change, and we will reconcile for the children's sake. I hope my decision to give him one last chance is right." Those sincere words now sounded like a final testament, because the last chance Trinh gave her husband led to an unimaginable tragedy. Prosecutors said they had advised Trinh not to cancel the protective order, but the young mother, feeling too much pity for her children and not wanting them to lose their father, had softened. The file closed with scrawled lines that Trinh wrote in the withdrawal application. "I pray that he truly changes." Sadly, that prayer was never answered, and she and her most beloved relatives had to pay with their very lives. To better understand the complex psychological motivations and root causes that drove Tan Quoc Do to this extreme action, the investigation team sought professional assistance from criminal psychology analysis experts. They conducted an extensive study of the formation and transformation process of the suspect's personality through each stage of his life. According to initial analyses, Tan Do wasn't always a person with violent tendencies. In fact, he had once had happy years alongside Trinh and the children when their small family was full of laughter and warmth. However, shocks and upheavals in life had gradually transformed his character in a negative direction. The important turning point began in the latter half of the 2000s, when the global financial crisis spread widely and strongly impacted the lives of millions of American families, including Thanh Do's family. Their financial situation became extremely precarious. They had to frequently move due to inability to afford stable rent, accumulated credit card debt of over $6,000, and even got involved in auxiliary debts related to car purchases. This persistent financial pressure created significant changes in Thanh Do's character and behavior. He became irritable, easily angered, and most importantly, increasingly inclined to use violence against his wife and children. Notably, according to expert assessment, these violent behaviors didn't stem from loss of control, but were actually a calculated tactic. Thanh Do consciously used fear as a control tool, aimed at making Trinh not dare think about leaving him. Another important psychological factor was that Thanh Do almost completely isolated himself from his wife's family. He lived reclusively, rarely socializing with Trinh's relatives, and seemed to harbor deep resentment toward this family. In Thanh Do's thinking, Trinh's sisters were the ones who had instigated and lured his wife against him. He felt that interference from his wife's family had damaged his authority and ability to control Trinh. According to expert assessment, this was a psychological type heavily laden with possessive thinking, viewing wife and children as property, but in an extreme direction. Either he must have them or everything would be destroyed. This type of psychology is commonly seen in cold-blooded killers who dare harm relatives and don't value life. His behavior was considered the result of vicious character, controlling tendencies, and inability to master anger. From the clues and testimonies collected, police successfully reconstructed the entire sequence of events. On the afternoon of July 2, 2011, Thanh Do's family rented Forum Roller World skating rink to organize an 11th birthday party for their eldest son. The skating area was decorated with colorful balloons, happy birthday banners, and a party table covered with a blue tablecloth displaying cake, candy, and gifts. About 30 guests, including relatives and close friends, were present in full attendance from 5 p.m. This was a rare occasion for the Ta family siblings to meet together completely. Trinh's parents also traveled from Arkansas to Texas to celebrate with children and grandchildren. Thanh Quoc Du, Trinh's husband, was also present despite their separation. Although still conflicted about inviting her husband, it was because their son only wanted the family to gather completely. Thanh Do arrived late to the party. Around 6 p.m. he appeared. Thanh brought a gift box for his son. Inside was the remote control car the boy had longed for, appearing quite quiet without much talking or laughing. Some adults in the family noticed Thanh was much more sullen than previous meetings. He only greeted briefly, then found a corner to sit alone. No one knew what was under his jacket. The party proceeded joyfully for over the first hour. Later, Trinh approached her husband to talk. No one knew what they discussed, most likely related to child custody. Afterward, Thanh frowned angrily, while Trinh sadly turned away. Around 7 p.m., everyone gathered at the party table to prepare for the cake-cutting ceremony. Thanh Do stood somewhat to the back, singing along, but his eyes darkened as he stared intently at his wife and sisters-in-law, who were happily singing celebrations. Applause rang out when the boy blew out candles and laughed innocently. Everyone cheered birthday wishes. Right then, Thanh Do quickly walked to the DJ table and said something quietly enough for the DJ to nod confusedly. Before the crowd's astonishment, Thanh suddenly shouted, "All kids get out of here right now, go somewhere else!" He spoke while waving his hand, pushing several small children standing nearby, causing them to fall. Before anyone could understand what was happening, several adults shouted for him to calm down, but Thanh Do had already drawn the firearm from inside his coat. A moment of dead silence enveloped the room, and then the first gunshot rang out with devastating force. The 9mm semi-automatic aimed straight at Trinh from just a few steps away. The bullet tore through air, striking the unfortunate woman's chest. Trinh opened her eyes wide, staggered, screamed once, then collapsed to the floor. Without time for anyone to react, Tan Do continued pulling the trigger, firing at people standing around Trinh. Lin Ta was hit and fell nearby, blood seeping from her clothes. Hien Ta was shot, staggered a few steps, then collapsed. Michelle, 28, screamed, then rushed toward youngest sister Lin, but before she could pull her sister up, she was hit twice, falling onto the floor right next to her sister. The massacre unfolded before their eyes, but Tan Do still wouldn't stop. His hand turned toward Thuy Nguyen, then coldly pulled the trigger. Thuy's husband reflexively turned to shield his wife, but it was too late. The bullet grazed his shoulder and hit Thuy. She collapsed, her eyes not yet closed. In just over 60 seconds, Tan Do had completely taken down 5 members of his wife's family. The remaining people also panicked, running to find hiding places or lying on the floor pleading. At the DJ booth, the young DJ trembled, hiding behind the mixing table, even forgetting to turn off the music. Several children hid behind chairs, crying and calling for their mothers. Tan Do swept his eyes around the room to check his handiwork. Seeing his wife and sisters-in-law all motionless, he slowly raised the barrel to his own temple. The final gunshot rang out dryly. Tan Do collapsed right among the bodies of his relatives. The perpetrator had ended his own life with the last bullet, closing a bloody massacre. The space suddenly sank into desolate silence, with only the weak groans of a few injured and the heart-wrenching cries of children hiding behind the office door. In just about 2 short minutes, many lives had changed forever. Immediately after the attack ended, the survivors got up in a daze. Jordan Pham knelt down hugging his wife Michelle, but she was no longer breathing. Thuy's husband, though wounded in the shoulder, still tried to crawl to his wife's side, choking as he called her name in vain. At this point, rink owner Hedrick dared to open the door and lead the children out. The 11-year-old boy still stood frozen near where his mother had fallen, his whole body trembling, eyes wide with horror at the scene before him. A family member quickly ran to embrace the 2 children tightly, not letting them look further. Police and ambulance sirens wailed outside, bringing everyone back to reality. Just minutes later, authorities flooded in, taking victims for emergency care and sealing off the scene. Everything had passed, but what remained was the mournful crying of survivors and an uncertain future for 2 children who suddenly became orphans. The family massacre in Grand Prairie was the tragic outcome of a process of accumulated violence and hatred. It didn't happen suddenly or without cause, but was an explosion point of long simmering conflict. Victim Trinh herself had tried very hard to change her fate. She had fled, sought legal intervention, then softened with hopes of reconciliation. As for perpetrator Tan Do, he chose the most sinful path of harming relatives, then taking his own life, leaving horror for his own flesh and blood children. The 2 children of him and Trinh, though escaping harm, still suffered lifelong psychological damage, requiring family members to bring in psychology experts to support them immediately after this incident. Because perpetrator Tan Quoc Du had taken his own life at the scene, immediately after completing the investigation, police closed the case file. In the short time after the case, Texas authorities reviewed procedures for issuing and revoking gun permits for cases with domestic violence history. And that concludes today's case. What do you think about this tragedy? Do you believe there were other hidden motives in Tan Quoc Du's cruel actions? Please share in the comments below. Thank you for following along. See you in upcoming videos.